Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name's Adalbert, and I'm 42. Until a few months ago, I thought I had it all: a stable job, 2 amazing kids, and a marriage I believed was solid. Turns out, I was living a lie. It all started when I decided to install a new security system in the house. You know, something high-tech with cameras and audio, just for peace of mind. My wife, Kate, was acting weird about it from the start, saying things like, "Do we really need all this? And you're so paranoid lately." Looking back, her resistance should have been a red flag. Anyway, I set it up while she was out running errands. It was kind of exciting testing the system. I had the app on my phone, which let me listen in and check the cameras remotely. That's when it happened. I was in my office, tinkering with the settings, when I overheard Kate talking in the kitchen. At first, I thought she was just on a call with a friend, but her tone caught my attention. She was whispering, which she only does when she's gossiping or talking about something shady. Curious, I tapped the app and turned up the volume. What I heard made my stomach drop. She was talking to Jake, her coworker, the guy she always said was just a buddy. Only this wasn't buddy talk. Kate was laying out some kind of plan, laughing and whispering. Words like, "make him look unstable," and "I'll handle the kids," floated through. My heart was pounding, but I couldn't stop listening. Then she said something that chilled me to the core. "Once it's done, we'll have everything: the house, the kids, and even his savings. He won't know what hit him." Jake chuckled, agreeing with her like this was a casual conversation about weekend plans. I hit record on my phone. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I knew I needed proof. My head was spinning. Was this some cruel joke? Were they seriously plotting to take everything from me? And why? I sat there for hours, replaying the recording, trying to make sense of it. Every time I heard her voice, her casual cruelty, I felt like I was losing my mind. This was the woman I'd built my life with. We had dreams, plans, a family. Or so I thought. That night, I barely slept. Kate came to bed, completely unaware of what I knew. She kissed me on the cheek, told me she loved me, and drifted off like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my life had unraveled so fast. I knew one thing for sure: I couldn't confront her yet. Not until I had more answers. The next morning, everything felt surreal. Kate was acting normal, making breakfast, packing the kids' lunches, smiling like she didn't just reveal herself as a master manipulator the night before. I went through the motions, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying her conversation with Jake and wondering how long this had been going on. I needed to know more. Luckily, Kate left for work that day. Once she was gone, I went full detective mode. First, I dug through her phone bill. I hadn't checked it in years because, honestly, I trusted her. Big mistake. Jake's number was everywhere. Daily calls, late-night texts, it was all there in black and white. Then, I remembered the security system. It had caught her once. Maybe it had picked up more. I logged into the system and combed through the audio recordings. At first, it was just normal household chatter, but then I struck gold, or in this case poison. One recording stood out: Kate talking to Jake on her lunch break a few days earlier. She was venting about how I was too controlling, and how she was tired of pretending to care. Then Jake suggested that if I had a breakdown or got arrested, it would make things easier for them. She laughed. She laughed. Hearing her like that was like a punch to the gut. I thought about our kids, how she could sit at the dinner table with them, help with homework, and tuck them into bed, all while plotting to rip apart their family. It didn't end there. I went through her computer and found emails. Some were about work, but others were different. She'd sent Jake detailed messages about how to build a case against me. One email even mentioned staging arguments and documenting them to make me look unhinged. By the time I finished reading, my hands were shaking. This wasn't just an affair. This was premeditated destruction. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was trying to erase me from my own life. But why? What had I done to deserve this? That night, I couldn't even look at her. She must have noticed something was off because she asked, "Are you okay?" I just nodded and mumbled something about work stress. I couldn't let her know I was onto her, not yet. I spent the next week gathering evidence. I recorded every suspicious conversation, saved every incriminating email, and even installed a keylogger on her laptop to catch her in real time. I had to protect myself and, more importantly, my kids. But keeping it all inside was eating me alive. I couldn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my friends, because what if they tipped her off? What if they didn't believe me? The only thing keeping me sane was the thought of seeing this through to the end. I didn't know how or when I'd confront her, but I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let her destroy me. By the second week, I had enough evidence to fill a folder on my laptop. Every time Kate smiled at me, it made my skin crawl. She'd ask if I wanted to watch a movie or go out to dinner, and I'd force myself to smile and say, maybe later. I was playing the part of the clueless husband, but inside, I was seething. One evening while Kate was out at yoga, I decided to do something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to her coworker Melanie. She was a quiet woman I'd only met a handful of times, but I remembered her being friendly. More importantly, I knew she and Jake worked closely together. I sent her a message on Facebook, keeping it casual. "Hi Melanie. I hope this isn't weird, but I need to ask you something about Jake. Do you have a minute?" She responded almost immediately. "Sure, what's up?" I hesitated. How much could I trust her? Finally, I typed, "I've been noticing some strange behavior between him and Kate. I'm just trying to figure out if there's something I should know." Her reply came quickly, and it was a bombshell. "Adalbert, I don't know how to say this, but you're not imagining things. Jake's been bragging about his thing with Kate for months. He even joked about how they've been planning something big. I thought it was just his usual trash talk, but now I'm not so sure." My chest tightened. "What kind of planning?" I asked. "I don't know. He's not the most discreet guy, but he said something about getting rid of competition. I didn't think he meant you, though." Melanie seemed genuinely shaken. She promised to keep an ear out and let me know if she heard anything else. I thanked her and logged off, my mind racing. If Jake was openly bragging about this at work, how deep did this go? And how many people knew about it? The next morning, Melanie messaged me again. "Adalbert, I overheard Jake talking to Kate on the phone just now. He mentioned something about a lawyer. Do you think she's filing for divorce?" I didn't reply. I couldn't. The thought of Kate trying to take me to court, armed with fabricated evidence, made my blood run cold. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I decided to tell someone I trusted completely, my brother Victor. He's 6 years older than me, a no-nonsense guy who's always had my back. I called him and spilled everything: the recordings, the emails, the phone calls with Jake. By the time I finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "Adalbert," he finally said, his voice low and steady, "you can't let her get away with this. Whatever you need, I'm here." Victor was the first person to make me feel like I wasn't crazy. He even offered to come over and help me strategize. "She wants to play dirty," he said. "Then you fight fire with fire." I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but one thing was clear: I wasn't alone anymore. With Victor in my corner, I finally felt like I had a fighting chance. He came over the next day with coffee and a notepad, ready to tackle this like a battle plan. "First things first," he said, "you need a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, a shark. Someone who eats people like Kate and Jake for breakfast." I nodded. He was right. This wasn't just about proving her betrayal, it was about protecting myself and my kids. After hours of searching, we found a family lawyer with a reputation for winning ugly custody battles. I made an appointment for later that week, but the waiting was torture. Every day, Kate moved around the house like nothing was wrong, humming while she cooked or laughing with the kids. It was infuriating. That Thursday, I finally met with the lawyer, a woman named Dana. She listened patiently as I laid out the whole twisted story. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Well," she said, "you've got quite the case here. If what you're saying checks out, you've got enough to turn the tables on her." She asked to see my evidence, so I handed over the recordings, emails, and a list of suspicious phone calls. Dana went through them carefully, her expression growing more serious with each passing minute. "This is solid," she said finally. "But if they're planning to frame you, you need to stay ahead of them. We'll file for custody first and make sure the court sees the real story before they can spin it." I left her office feeling a mix of relief and dread. This was the first real step, but it also meant things were about to escalate. That night, Victor came over again, and we started working on a contingency plan. "You need to be ready for anything," he said. Kate's already proven she's willing to lie. Who knows what she'll do when she realizes the jig is up? He wasn't wrong. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. Kate was in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone while sipping coffee. I casually asked, "Hey, do you think we should update our wills? You know, for the kids." She froze for a split second before forcing a smile. "Why would you bring that up now?" "Just being practical," I said, shrugging. "You never know what could happen." Her laugh was strained. "I think we're fine for now." It was a small thing, but her reaction confirmed my suspicions. She was hiding something. Later that day, Melanie messaged me again with more intel. "Jake told someone at work he's meeting Kate this weekend to finalize the plan. Do you know what that means?" I didn't, but I wasn't going to sit around and wait to find out. After Melanie's tip about Jake and Kate's weekend plans, I knew I had to act. If they were meeting to finalize the plan, this might be my best chance to get undeniable evidence. I reached out to Victor again, and we brainstormed for hours. "You've got the security system," he said. "Can you expand its range? Maybe get audio where they're meeting." That gave me an idea. The system had portable microphones, tiny ones meant for outdoor use. I could plant one in Kate's car. If she and Jake had another conversation, I'd have it all on tape. That Friday evening, I waited until Kate was in the shower. My heart was pounding as I snuck into the garage with the microphone. I tucked it under the passenger seat, securing it with tape. It was risky, but I had no other choice. The next morning, Kate announced she was going out for brunch with the girls. She kissed me on the cheek, grabbed her keys, and left without a second glance. I sat in the living room with my phone in hand, waiting for the microphone feed to activate. When it finally did, my chest tightened. At first, there was nothing but the sound of the car engine and the radio. Then I heard her voice. "Hey," she said, and I realized she was on speakerphone. "I'm on my way." Jake's voice came through loud and clear. "Good. We need to make sure everything's airtight. The lawyer said we'll need more than just arguments. Pictures, texts, anything to back up our claims." I clenched my fists. "Don't worry," Kate replied. "I've been saving screenshots and keeping a journal of every incident. He doesn't even know what's coming." They kept talking about timelines, custody, and dividing assets. Every word felt like a knife to the chest, but I forced myself to listen. Then Jake said something that made my blood boil. "Once this is over, we'll finally be able to start fresh. Just us." Kate's response was chilling. "I can't wait. It's about time he's out of the picture." By the time the call ended, I was shaking with rage. But I also knew I had them. The recording was crystal clear, and it was all I needed to blow their plans apart. When Kate came home later, she acted like nothing had happened. She even brought home pastries for the kids, smiling and laughing like the doting mom she pretended to be. I played along, but inside, I was already planning my next move. That night, I called Dana, my lawyer. When I played her the recording, she let out a low whistle. "Adalbert," she said, "this changes everything." She explained how we could use the recording to file a motion with the court, preempting any claims Kate might make. "This isn't just infidelity," Dana said. "This is conspiracy. The court isn't going to look kindly on this." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was in control again. After talking to Dana, things started moving quickly. She filed an emergency motion to secure custody and freeze our joint assets until the court could review the evidence. It was a bold move, but with the recording and everything else I'd gathered, she was confident we had the upper hand. For the next few days, I walked on eggshells around Kate, waiting for the fallout. She was her usual self, chatty with the kids, polite but distant with me. It was almost like she knew something was coming but didn't want to tip her hand. I couldn't help but wonder if Jake had warned her. On Wednesday morning, my phone buzzed with an email from Dana. "Motion approved. Temporary custody granted to you. Court date set for 2 weeks from now." I stared at the screen, the words barely sinking in. Temporary custody. That meant the kids would stay with me while the court reviewed the evidence. Kate wouldn't be able to take them or make any major decisions without my approval. It was a victory, but it felt bittersweet. My kids didn't know what was happening yet, and the thought of dragging them into this mess made my stomach turn. That evening, I sat down with Victor to plan how to break the news. "You can't blindside her," he said. "If you just hand her the court papers, she might flip out and do something drastic." He was right. Kate was unpredictable, and I couldn't risk her reacting violently or taking off with the kids. So I decided to wait until the weekend, when the kids would be at my parents' house. I called my mom and dad, telling them I needed their help with a little family issue. They didn't ask too many questions, just said they'd be happy to spend time with their grandkids. By Saturday afternoon, the house was eerily quiet. Kate was out running errands, and I was waiting for her to come back. I had the court documents on the dining table, along with a recording device in case things got heated. When she finally walked through the door, she looked surprised to see me sitting there. "What's going on?" she asked, setting down a bag of groceries. I motioned for her to sit. "We need to talk," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Her smile faltered. "About what?" I slid the papers across the table toward her. "About this." She glanced down, her face going pale as she skimmed the documents. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, her voice rising. "It's everything," I said. "I know about you and Jake. I know about your plans to frame me. And now the court knows too." For a moment, she just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she was searching for the right words. Then her expression hardened. "You're insane," she hissed. "Do you really think a judge is going to believe your lies?" "I don't need them to believe me," I said calmly. "I have proof. Recordings, emails, phone logs, all of it." Her face twisted in fury. "You were spying on me? That's illegal." "No," I said firmly. "What's illegal is conspiring with Jake to take my kids and my money." Kate stood abruptly, knocking over her chair. "You're going to regret this," she snarled. "You think you're so smart, but you don't know who you're messing with." She stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. I didn't follow. My hands were shaking, but I felt a strange sense of relief. For the first time, the truth was out in the open. The battle was just beginning, but at least I wasn't fighting blind anymore. The hours after Kate stormed out were some of the longest of my life. She didn't come back that night, and I couldn't relax, wondering what her next move would be. By Sunday morning, I was starting to think she might have gone straight to Jake's place to regroup. Sure enough, my phone buzzed around noon with a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won? This isn't over." It didn't take a genius to figure out it was from Kate. I showed the text to Victor, who just shook his head. "She's bluffing," he said. "She's trying to scare you. Don't let her get in your head." Easier said than done. By Monday morning, the real counterattack began. I was at work when Dana called. "Adalbert, you're not going to like this," she said, her voice tense. "What happened?" I asked, bracing myself. "She filed a police report," Dana replied. "She's accusing you of domestic violence." My blood ran cold. "What?" I said, barely able to process her words. "That's insane. I've never laid a hand on her." Dana sighed. "I know, and we can prove it. But false allegations like this can still complicate the custody case. The good news is, her timing works against her. The court's already seen your evidence, so this is going to look like retaliation." Even so, the accusation was devastating. I didn't just care about winning in court, I cared about my reputation, my kids, and the truth. That evening, a police officer came to my door to follow up on the report. He was professional but firm, asking questions about my relationship with Kate. "She claims you've been verbally and physically abusive," the officer said, flipping through his notes. "Can you account for your behavior over the last few weeks?" "I've never abused her," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "If anything, she's the one who's been manipulative. I have recordings and documents to back that up." The officer nodded, jotting something down. "We'll include that in our report. For now, just sit tight and let the process play out." After he left, I felt drained. Victor came over with dinner, trying to lift my spirits. "This is what people like Kate do when they're cornered," he said. "They lash out. But you've got the truth on your side." He was right, but it didn't make the waiting any easier. Over the next few days, things escalated. Kate started spreading rumors among our mutual friends, claiming I was dangerous and unstable. A few people reached out, asking if I was okay, while others quietly distanced themselves. The worst part was knowing the kids would eventually hear about all this. I'd done everything I could to shield them, but it was only a matter of time before they started asking questions. Then, on Thursday, I got a call from Melanie. "You're not going to believe this," she said. Jake's been bragging at work again. He thinks they've got you cornered. What's he saying? I asked, gripping the phone tightly. He told someone that Kate's report will buy them time to come up with a backup plan. He's acting like this is some kind of game. Hearing that made my blood boil. But it also gave me clarity. Jake and Kate were desperate, and desperate people make mistakes. I called Dana that evening and told her everything Melanie had said. This could work in our favor, Dana said. If we can show the court that these accusations are part of a larger scheme, it'll strengthen your case. The thought of exposing Kate and Jake for what they were kept me going. I wasn't just fighting for myself, I was fighting for my kids, my integrity, and my future. The days leading up to the court hearing were a whirlwind of preparation. Dana worked tirelessly, organizing the evidence and preparing counterarguments to Kate's allegations. Meanwhile, I tried to hold it together at home. The kids noticed something was off. My daughter Sophie asked, "Dad, why hasn't Mom been home much?" My son Liam didn't say much, but he stuck close to me, like he could sense the tension. I told them the truth, but just enough to keep them calm. "Mom and I are figuring some things out," I said. "But no matter what, we both love you very much." It felt hollow, but what else could I say? Meanwhile, Kate was ramping up her efforts. One of my coworkers, a friend I'd known for years, pulled me aside at work. "Hey, Adalbert," he said, lowering his voice. "I don't want to pry, but I heard from someone that Kate's saying some pretty nasty stuff about you. Is everything okay?" I sighed, grateful for his concern but tired of the constant attacks. "She's trying to discredit me," I explained. "I can't get into details, but trust me, I'm handling it." What stung the most was how easily people seemed to believe her lies. It made me realize how much power perception has, even when the truth is on your side. 2 days before the hearing, Melanie came through again. She managed to get her hands on an internal work memo from Jake. It wasn't explicit, but it mentioned contingency plans and referred to a difficult personal matter involving an outside party. Dana said it wasn't a smoking gun, but it added to the narrative that Jake and Kate were scheming. The night before the court date, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined the worst-case scenario: Kate winning custody, Jake worming his way into my kids' lives, and me being painted as some monster. Victor stayed over, sensing how on edge I was. "You've got this, Adalbert," he said. "Everything they've done is going to come back to bite them. Trust me." I nodded, but his words felt far away. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in my best suit and kissed the kids goodbye before dropping them at my parents' house. "I'll see you tonight," I told them, forcing a smile. Sophie hugged me tightly, like she didn't want to let go. When I arrived at the courthouse, Dana was already there, her briefcase in hand and a determined look on her face. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I replied. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, almost intimate. Kate was already there, sitting with her lawyer. She looked polished and calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment 100 times. Jake wasn't there, probably a strategic move to keep him out of the spotlight. As the hearing began, Kate's lawyer wasted no time painting me as an unfit father. They brought up the police report, claiming it was evidence of a pattern of aggression. Dana countered with the recordings and emails, methodically dismantling their narrative. She played the conversation where Kate and Jake discussed framing me, letting the judge hear their voices for himself. Kate's face paled as the recording played. For the first time, she looked rattled. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke from the heart. I told the judge about my love for my kids, my efforts to be a good father, and how blindsided I'd been by Kate's betrayal. "I'm not perfect," I admitted, my voice steady. "But I've done everything I can to protect my children from this mess. I just want what's best for them." By the time the hearing ended, I felt drained but hopeful. The judge announced that he would review the evidence and issue a ruling within the week. As we left the courthouse, Dana turned to me. "You did great in there," she said. "Now we wait." It wasn't much comfort, but it was something. The days after the hearing crawled by. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, hoping it was Dana with news. At the same time, I dreaded what she might say. What if the judge didn't believe me? What if Kate's lies were enough to sway things in her favor? By the 5th day, I was a nervous wreck. My parents kept the kids busy, taking them to the park and helping with homework, but I could see the worry in their eyes too. Finally, late Thursday afternoon, Dana called. "Adalbert," she said, her voice unusually calm. "The judge ruled in our favor." I nearly dropped the phone. What does that mean exactly?" "It means you have temporary full custody," she explained. "Kate will still have visitation rights, but they'll be supervised for now." The judge found her behavior, and the recordings, deeply concerning. He's also issued a protective order, which prevents her from making any further false allegations against you. I slumped into a chair, the weight of the news washing over me. "So, what happens next?" "We'll move toward a formal custody agreement," Dana said. "This isn't over, but this is a huge win. Take a breath, Adalbert. You've earned it." When I hung up, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. I'd won the first battle, but at what cost? My marriage was in ruins, my kids would have to navigate a fractured family, and the person I'd once trusted most in the world had become my enemy. Victor came over to celebrate that evening, bringing pizza and a six-pack. "This calls for a toast," he said, handing me a beer. "To you, Adalbert, the man who doesn't back down." I managed a small smile. "Thanks, Vic. I couldn't have done this without you." The next morning, Dana sent over the official paperwork detailing the judge's ruling. I couldn't help but notice how carefully it was worded. Temporary custody, supervised visits, pending further review. It wasn't final, but it was enough to give me hope. That evening, Kate came to pick up the kids for her first supervised visit. She was waiting in the driveway when I walked the kids out. "Daddy, why can't we go with Mommy like usual?" Sophie asked, her voice small. I knelt down and looked her in the eye. "This is just for now, sweetie," I said gently. "Mom and I are working on some things, but we both love you very much." Sophie nodded, but I could tell she didn't fully understand. When Kate saw me, her expression hardened. "Congratulations," she said sarcastically. "You must feel really proud of yourself." "This isn't about pride, Kate," I replied evenly. "It's about what's best for the kids." She scoffed, but before she could say more, the supervisor, an older woman named Janet, stepped out of her car. "Mrs. Parker," she said, addressing Kate, "we'll need to review the guidelines before you leave." Kate's face turned red, but she forced a smile and nodded. As I watched them drive away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief that my kids were safe. Sadness for what they were being dragged through. And anger, at Kate, at Jake, and at the mess my life had become. The supervised visits began without much issue, at least at first. Janet, the supervisor, would text me updates, letting me know the kids were doing fine and that Kate was cooperative, though distant. But after the third visit, Janet called me directly. "Mr. Parker," she said carefully, "I need to inform you of something unusual that happened today." My stomach dropped. "Is everything okay? Are the kids all right?" "They're fine," Janet assured me. But during today's visit, Mrs. Parker kept asking the children odd questions. Things about your temper, whether you ever yell at them, or if you seem stressed lately. I redirected her each time, but it seemed like she was fishing for something. I felt a spark of anger flare up. "She's trying to build a new case," I said, barely able to contain my frustration. "That was my impression as well," Janet said. "I've documented everything and will include it in my report to the court." "Thank you," I said, my voice tight. "I appreciate you letting me know." When the kids came home that evening, they seemed a little off. Sophie was unusually quiet, and Liam kept asking me if I was okay. I knelt down and hugged them both. "I'm fine, guys," I said. "You don't need to worry about me, okay?" Sophie looked up at me, her big eyes filled with concern. "Mommy asked a lot of questions about you today," she said softly. "What kind of questions?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. "She wanted to know if you ever get mad at us," Sophie said. I told her no, but she kept asking. I clenched my jaw, but I forced myself to smile. "Thank you for being honest, sweetie. You're very brave." That night, I called Dana to update her. She wasn't surprised. "This is a classic move," she said. "When someone like Kate starts losing, they get desperate. But as long as you stay calm and keep doing what you're doing, she won't get anywhere." Staying calm was easier said than done. A few days later, I got a call from Melanie. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "What now?" I asked, bracing myself. "Jake was bragging again," she said. "Apparently, he and Kate are planning to file a countersuit, claiming emotional distress and defamation." I let out a bitter laugh. "Defamation? Seriously?" They're the ones who've been lying and scheming. I know, Melanie said. But Jake thinks they can spin it to make you look like the aggressor. I thanked her for the heads up and immediately called Dana. She didn't seem fazed. Let them try, she said. We've already established their pattern of manipulation. A countersuit like that will only reinforce it. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that Kate and Jake were capable of anything. By the time the next visit rolled around, I was on edge. Janet texted me afterward, saying it had gone smoothly, but something about her tone felt off. I decided to call her. Janet, is everything all right? I asked. There was a long pause. Yes, Mr. Parker, she said finally. But I should let you know that Mrs. Parker tried to give Sophie a cell phone during the visit. I confiscated it, as per the guidelines, but she insisted it was just for emergencies. I felt my anger bubble up again. Kate was trying to find a way to bypass the supervised visits, to talk to the kids without anyone monitoring her. That's not happening, I said firmly. Thank you for catching it. I hung up and sat in the silence of the house, my mind racing. Kate wasn't giving up, and I knew things would get worse before they got better. For now, though, the kids were safe. And as long as I had that, I could handle anything. After the cell phone incident, I realized Kate wasn't just desperate, she was relentless. She wasn't going to stop until she found a way to regain control. That thought kept me up at night, running through every worst-case scenario in my head. The following week, Janet called again. Mr. Parker, she said hesitantly, today's visit raised a red flag. My chest tightened. What happened? Mrs. Parker told the children that you were keeping them away from her on purpose, Janet explained. She said things like, Daddy doesn't want us to be a family anymore, and one day you'll understand that I'm the one who really loves you. Hearing that made my blood boil. She's trying to turn them against me, I said, pacing the kitchen. That's what it seems like, Janet said. I've documented everything and will include it in my report to the court. For now, I'd recommend keeping the lines of communication open with your kids and reassuring them. Thank you, Janet, I said, though my frustration was hard to mask. After hanging up, I sat down with Sophie and Liam. Hey guys, I said, keeping my tone light. I know things are a little different right now, but I want you to know that I love you both so much. And so does your mom. Mom said you're mad at her, Liam said, frowning. I took a deep breath. Mom and I are just working through some grown-up problems, I said carefully. But none of it is your fault, okay? And no matter what, we both want what's best for you. They nodded, but I could tell they were confused. Meanwhile, Kate and Jake weren't slowing down. Melanie called me later that week with another update. Jake's been on the warpath, she said. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that you're trying to destroy his life. I let out a humorless laugh. He's the one who got involved with my wife. I know, Melanie said. But he's trying to spin it like you're some vindictive ex who can't let go. He's even hinting that he might sue you for defamation. Let him try, I said, though the thought of another legal battle made my stomach churn. Dana wasn't worried. Their behavior only helps our case, she said. The more they escalate, the more they show their true colors. Just keep documenting everything. I took her advice to heart. I recorded every interaction, saved every text, and even started journaling about the kids' behavior after visits with Kate. Then, out of nowhere, I got an email from someone I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "You need to see this." Against my better judgment, I opened it. Inside was a link to a private video file. I hesitated, wondering if it was some kind of trap, but curiosity got the better of me. The video was grainy but clear enough to recognize Jake and Kate. They were in what looked like a parking lot, arguing. "You're screwing this up," Jake said angrily, gesturing wildly. "I'm doing everything I can." Kate snapped back. "Do you think this is easy for me?" "You're not doing enough," Jake said, his voice rising. "If you can't handle this, I'll take care of it myself." The video ended abruptly, leaving me stunned. I forwarded it to Dana immediately. "Where did this come from?" she asked when we spoke. "I have no idea," I admitted. "But whoever sent it must want to help." "This is huge," Dana said. "It proves there's tension between them and undermines their credibility. We'll submit it to the court as supplemental evidence." As much as I hated relying on anonymous tips, I couldn't deny that this video was a game changer. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I was regaining control. The anonymous video turned out to be the break I didn't know I needed. Dana filed it as supplemental evidence the next morning, and by afternoon, the court issued a notice for an expedited review of our case. "This video speaks volumes," Dana said during a late-night call. "It's not just about their argument, it shows their instability. That's not something the court will overlook, especially in a custody case." I wasn't about to get my hopes up too much, but for the first time, it felt like the tide was shifting in my favor. Meanwhile, I tried to keep things as normal as possible for Sophie and Liam. We baked cookies, watched movies, and worked on school projects. It was a fragile piece, but it was something to hold on to. Then, Kate made her next move. It started with a call from my bank. "Mr. Parker," the representative said, "we noticed some unusual activity on your joint account. Did you authorize a withdrawal of $5,000 yesterday?" "What?" I said, my heart sinking. "No, I didn't." After a brief pause, the rep confirmed that Kate had made the withdrawal. My hands tightened on the phone. "She wasn't supposed to access that account without my permission," I said. "We can flag it and initiate an investigation," the rep offered. "Please do," I said. I called Dana immediately. She wasn't surprised. "She's trying to drain assets before the court can make a final ruling," she said. "Don't worry, we'll address it. The protective order gives us leverage to have the funds frozen again." I was livid, but there wasn't much else I could do in the moment. A few days later, the court scheduled a follow-up hearing to address the new evidence. I braced myself for another round of accusations, but when the day arrived, something unexpected happened. Jake showed up. He wasn't supposed to be there. This was a custody hearing, not a general civil case. But there he was, sitting next to Kate and glaring at me like he wanted to start a fight. Dana noticed immediately. "This is unusual," she said. "Let's see how it plays out." As the hearing began, Kate's lawyer leaned heavily on the domestic violence accusation, even though the judge had already expressed skepticism about it. Then they pivoted to Jake. "Your Honor," Kate's lawyer said, "we'd like to call a character witness to speak on Mrs. Parker's behalf." Jake stood and made his way to the stand. My stomach turned as he introduced himself, painting a picture of himself as a concerned friend who had only ever wanted to support Kate during a difficult time. He denied any romantic involvement and described me as controlling and erratic. Dana was ready. When it was her turn to cross-examine, she wasted no time pulling out the anonymous video. "Mr. Morgan," she said, addressing Jake, "you claim to have no romantic involvement with Mrs. Parker, yet this video clearly shows you arguing with her in a parking lot. Can you explain that?" Jake's face turned red. "We were just frustrated," he stammered. "With what, exactly?" Dana pressed. "Your plan to discredit Mr. Parker? Your attempts to manipulate this court?" Jake fumbled for words, but the damage was done. The judge's expression was stern, and Kate looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. By the end of the hearing, it was clear that the court wasn't buying their story. The judge ordered an immediate freeze on all joint assets and extended my temporary custody order indefinitely. As we left the courthouse, Dana turned to me with a rare smile. "That couldn't have gone better," she said. "They're unraveling, Adalbert. Stay the course." I nodded, feeling a surge of hope. For the first time in weeks, it felt like I was truly ahead. After the hearing, things moved quickly. The judge's decision to freeze our joint assets left Kate scrambling. Melanie called me a few days later with more intel. "Jake's losing it," she said. "He's been ranting about how Kate's dragging him down and how he should have never gotten involved." I couldn't help but smirk at that. It seemed their perfect little alliance was starting to crack. Kate, meanwhile, was growing more erratic. Janet, the visitation supervisor, called to report another incident. "She tried to give Sophie a letter during the visit," Janet said. "I confiscated it, but I thought you should know." "What did the letter say?" I asked. Janet hesitated. "It was manipulative. She told Sophie to stay strong, and that Daddy is confused right now. It's clear she's trying to alienate the kids." I thanked Janet and passed the information along to Dana, who promised to use it in the next court filing. Meanwhile, Jake was making his own moves. He filed a formal complaint against me, claiming I had harassed him and spread false rumors. It was laughable, given all the evidence we presented in court, but it was another layer of stress I didn't need. Dana wasn't worried. "This is desperation," she said. "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. Stay calm, and we'll handle it." I took her advice, focusing on my kids and the small victories we'd achieved so far. But deep down, I knew the battle wasn't over yet. During her next supervised visit, she lashed out at Janet, accusing her of being biased and siding with Adalbert. Janet stayed professional, but afterward, she called me to report the outburst. "She's unraveling," Janet said. "It might be time to request a psychological evaluation." Dana agreed. The following week, she filed a motion for a full evaluation of Kate's mental state, citing Janet's reports and Kate's increasingly erratic behavior. Kate's reaction was immediate. That evening, she sent me a barrage of texts, alternating between pleading for me to drop the case and threatening to make me regret it. I saved every message and forwarded them to Dana. "This only strengthens your case," she said. Meanwhile, Jake had gone radio silent. Melanie said he'd been avoiding work and was rumored to be looking for a new job out of state. "They're falling apart," Victor said when I told him. "Just stay steady. You're almost there." I clung to that hope, even as I braced for whatever Kate might do next. The court hearing for the psychological evaluation came faster than I expected. Dana presented Janet's reports, the manipulative letters to the kids, and Kate's threatening texts. The judge approved the motion without hesitation. Kate looked furious as the decision was announced, but there was little she could do. A week later, the evaluation results were in. The report described her as emotionally unstable with tendencies toward manipulative behavior. It wasn't a complete condemnation, but it was enough to convince the court to formalize my custody arrangement. The final ruling granted me full custody, with Kate's visitation rights limited to supervised sessions until she completed therapy. Jake, who had vanished entirely by this point, wasn't even mentioned. When the judge read the decision, Kate broke down sobbing in the courtroom. Part of me wanted to feel sorry for her, but I couldn't. Not after everything she had done. As the dust settled, I found myself standing in my kitchen one evening, watching Sophie and Liam do their homework at the table. The house was quiet, peaceful in a way it hadn't been in months. Victor dropped by with a six-pack to celebrate. "It's over, man," he said, handing me a beer. "Almost," I said. "The kids still have a lot of healing to do." "So do I."